So, what is it about your film? First of all, you can introduce yourself, introduce your film. Some of these films are older than others. So whatever you're working on now, feel free to plug stuff. But then also let's just talk about what in your film you thought was sort of revolutionary and the kinds of ideas that prompted you to make them in the first place. And I'd love to start over here.
So it's funny, in terms of being revolutionary, I mean, the sort of character, like most of the voiceover and things for that were actually either direct things that my father had said or sort of my own, like, adaptation of them. And the whole film is kind of about somebody who's, who's aware of their problems and they own them, but they're actually doing nothing to change it, and, like, they're justifying sort of being an asshole but not thinking about it as an asshole, like it's okay because you're aware of it. Which I have some trouble with, maybe we all do. So I kind of made that film, I guess, in a certain indirect way to sort of show my dad back to himself. And, you know, when he had seen it, he was like, oh, what the fuck is wrong with this person? And I was like, who said that shit? So I guess, I mean, like, in terms of a revolution in the character, I would hope that when a real revolution happens, those are the type of people that will be left behind. But in terms of my goal for doing it was to sort of poetically present my father back to him, or maybe people that think a certain way about things, to hopefully open them up to see something they're incapable of seeing in themselves.
Man, my film has like a long backstory. I'm gonna try to like tell it as abbreviated as I can. So it's really about the Great Migration. In 2016, that was the 100-year anniversary of the Great Migration. So initially, I was supposed to do this huge like art exhibit at Navy Pier. And so we've been building up to this like since 2014. And I don't know if they opened these hotels up yet, but they were supposed to open these boutique hotels up at Navy Pier. So we had our space all mapped out, and I had all the artists ready for this, and like I kind of was putting together a film that I was going to show as part of my exhibit. I was also curating it as well. And Navy Pier came to us maybe 2 months before we were about to do it, and they're like, oh, so we're going to just open these boutique hotels up. You guys can't like do art show anymore. So I mean, honestly, I can't be too mad because they're making millions of dollars off of that, and we didn't pay them for it.
You could go ahead and be mad.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's cool. I got a nice movie out of it, you know. So anyhow, I didn't want to like scrap the whole idea of it, so I wanted to create something. So I shot this short film. We shot it in the Sears Tower, the original Sears Tower building on the west side. It's like back in the day, all the black people on the west side like worked there. Like that was literally like just, it was the equivalent of like the Ford place in Michigan. And so I thought it'd be really cool to shoot it there. The concept behind it is I wanted to kind of have these modern day artists show, like be like ghosts in a sense in this building, this historic building, and show the connection between artists, black artists now, and where they came from in the Great Migration. So kind of just continuously show this side by side thing, like Langston Hughes being connected to a rap artist now in that sense. And so with that being said, it's just really easy to see how connected in a revolutionary kind of way that the Great Migration gave birth to what's going on now, and especially with what's going on in society today. So we just put the film out in May. It premiered in Europe, did really well, and this is like the second time I showed in Chicago, so that's good. Thanks.
And I am a local artist, and I do a lot of different things. One of the things I do is video. I work together with Jeffro on the Petcoat piece. The work that I do in video, for a large part of it, is support for people who are doing activism, and for me, it's a way to learn about struggles and learn about what people are doing about them, personally, it's really inspiring. That's one of the reasons I really like to do it. Is personally, it's really inspiring. It educates me, and it helps me to. Pieces like this that I do are used a lot of the times to educate people, like disseminate information and that sort of thing. So I'm really glad that I can be part of that. Yeah, I think that, and we're talking about doing sort of a follow-up to this with, I guess, what you're talking about.
I took part in Every Great Detective movie. I guess the question, is it revolutionary? It was taking a look at, so from Chicago, moved downstate for a little while when I was a little kid, and grew up next to big strip coal mines, and grew up with a lot of different fossil fuel, but that dust blowing all over us, the respiratory issues, things like that. Moving back to the city when I was a teenager, getting in touch with different fights, like environmental justice fights. And I think what is maybe revolutionary about that is you look at something has a lot of infrastructure, like the tar sands project, and every stop along the way there's communities like that are fighting, and it was wanting to take a look at, and involved because I was in it too, but like one stop just along the way of that huge like juggernaut that is something like the tar sands.
I'm originally from Montgomery, Alabama, so I go back and visit for the holidays and see my family, and a lot of times I get bored, so I make movies while I'm there. And I'm working up to my first feature film, which is going to be a Southern Gothic horror movie called The Trickle Down. And this piece, Bama Bell, as well as another one that I made before it called The Lily Splash, are films that I made, just me, myself, and I. I used a Canon Rebel, and you know, I do a lot of work where there's really great equipment, and I hire an editor, and you have a boom operator and all that good stuff, but it's really fulfilling to me to be all the parts to make a film sometimes. And so with Bama Bell, it served as an exploration to kind of like cathartically get out some stuff so that by the time I'm really honing in on what this feature is going to be, I've hit and touched on specific themes or characters or perspectives that I want to further explore later on. So that's kind of what that film was. My mom is also a voice in it, and she also appears. Rachel Gandy is the lead in it, and then also I have like little cameos and voiceover work. I consider Bama Bell to be a discovery piece as I work my way to something hopefully really special.
I'm a filmmaker in Chicago. I was a producer on Uninsurable, Aaron Potter's story. That is the first episode of a series that is going to take, well, we hope to make 3 more in the same vein. And the purpose of Uninsurable is to tell the current story of healthcare in America. It's a really isolating and complex issue that, I mean, I don't have to tell you guys that it's really important and it's not going to go away. So we hope to go around the country to tell stories about people how healthcare has has affected their community. And I really appreciate that you showed it right before the Petco piece, because I think that it's important to realize that healthcare policy doesn't just affect us personally, it affects our communities. And it's important to realize how those issues are integrated. Eventually, after the 4 are produced, we hope that we can use those as building blocks on a larger website and platform and create larger social media campaigns so other people can share and submit their own personal stories. And we can, I don't know, have a greater discussion on the actual issues of healthcare in this country as opposed to just insurance reform. in regards to like pharmaceuticals, mental health access, pre-existing conditions, but also because not everyone has had leukemia 3 times by the time they're 13, and like that doesn't mean that your problems aren't important. So look out for more.
I'm the director, actually the co-director of the first piece that you watched, which is The Lost Marionettes of Ralph Kipnis. My co-director is Joseph R. Lewis, and he could not be here tonight due to work and education, and also he is in the middle of raising a family. And so, yes, this project started in 2013, so this would be about the 4-year anniversary. And I'm actually glad that you showed mine first, David, because mine, I would say, is probably a relic of the past compared to the rest of the pieces we saw here today. And for me, I guess in terms of revolutionary factor, I would say doing that project was like really my thrust into film school. Now, I had been making films and videos and such ever since I was in high school, going through college and stuff, but I kind of plateaued until around 2013, whenever I met somebody who had been more experienced at it and more importantly was far better at it than I am, and that is of course Joseph R. Lewis. And producing partner, legendary Lou Ojeda and Dimitra Materas. And it was Joseph whose voice that you heard throughout narrating the piece, because it was he who had this neighbor out in Noble Square who told him about this building, this abandoned apartment building that had this huge collection of weird wooden dolls. And of course it turned out to be the man Ralph Kipnis' handcrafted, hand-painted wooden marionettes that he had made over the span of almost 60 years. And so we put together a Kickstarter campaign to see if we could raise the funding necessary in order to buy back all those marionettes, because that building was owned by a person whose name I cannot state for legal reasons. And despite getting coverage in the Chicago Sun-Times, despite getting seen on NBC Chicago 5, and despite our Kickstarter getting funded partially by people such as William Gibson and Neil Gaiman, along with tweets by them as well, we did not make our goal. And as far as I know, those marionettes are still in that building, if not have all been completely thrown out. And so, in showing this little segment here, which you can see the rest of the story on our YouTube page through the Underground Multiplex, for me, I feel like the failure of raising the money necessary was, for me, a far more invaluable lesson in terms of, such as, there's activism goals that one always seeks out, and sometimes you make those goals, which is great. Other times you don't, and what do you do at that point? Do you give up, or do you keep on going? Well, I'm still here now, still making films and videos, along with the fine people sitting up here, and I don't feel the need to give up anytime soon.
Woo! Yeah. It's like really personal businesses out. It's like super freaking hard, and I think that we like have this idea that it's like, oh, I'll just put this out there, and like I'm passionate about it, and I know all these people are passionate about it. Surely it'll succeed, and then you have people that have influence, and you're surprised when it doesn't take off, but it's like a full-time job, and I think we underestimate that you're literally like launching a business, and so I think it's, give yourself a break.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Do you think it's been like sort of like the reputation has been sort of tarnished too? I feel like it was really hot when it first came out, and now there's been a lot of like
I think
scams.
there's really cool diversification of like there's music platforms, and so people are going to be more specific about what they explore. But I also think with that you have more volume, and so there's more. I mean, there's also just more to sift through, and definitely like each one has its ways, and so like GoFundMe and things like that, right? It's like personal, and then Indiegogo, because they're less strict than Kickstarter, has far more that you have to sift through. But there's also a lot of like human rights and activist stuff because they're way more open and accepting of like being something based in cause, whereas Kickstarter is more about product.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it's tainted, but I think that it's still an amazing concept to have a crowd of people actually recognize something. Today I was thinking about Black Lives Matter, and I was thinking, what if I asked every one of my white friends to give $1?
hi, I'm a Johnny Bolden. I don't know like most of you. So crowdsourcing is chess, not checkers.
Yes.
I mean, it's really, really difficult. I mean, I know people who have like, you know, sketched out comic books for like huge people. I mean, I don't feel like, you know, throwing shade, because, you know, it's like you'll draw something for somebody who's really popular, they have a lot of clout, but then, you know, they won't end up transferring that clout over to you. And they won't really like report, you know, oh, well, he was really good. They'll be like, oh, well, he was cool, he was alright. But people don't want to hire people based on an alright. So then, you know, you'll try and make your own comic or something like that. And this is just an example. I mean, I don't draw, but you'll put it out there. You'll say, hey, you know, I'd really appreciate it if you would share this online, or, you know, making this novel, I would really appreciate it if you would share it. But there's this sort of unspoken magic that applies to like getting people to pay attention to your work. And, you know, being black, being, you know, outspokenly black, you know, there's not people that, I mean, people will literally like just not look at my work. They're like, oh, he said something about Ferguson like 5 years ago. And it's rough, but I mean, I accept there's not, like, there's good, but, you know, in those terms, there's not a lot of advantages. I mean, the number one advantage is that, you know, you're unique. Like, I mean, it does give it, but then you get tired of it, because, like, I think it was some YouTube artist. He said, if a black artist paints a flower, it's a black flower. Yeah. And I mean, it becomes this label, and then so any work that you make, any work that you crowdsource, automatically gets pegged as a black work, no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's about, you know, white children frolicking out to Wonderland. It becomes a metaphor for, you know, the black existence, and how like yeah, you can. So I mean, I guess. right. I'm not interested in that. But yeah, I mean, it's like there's just so many factors. There's skin color, there's ethnicity, there's what community you're based in. Like, I mean, if you live in Edgewater and you know like all these artists in Edgewater, you're gonna get so much more reach than if you live in Chatham and you know like artists in Chatham that are like, you know, slumming, working at McDonald's for money.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I don't completely like disagree with that, but I feel like Kickstarters and all that, it just all has to do with like ebbs and flows and like trends, right? Because there are people like Spike Lee, there are people like Kowski's that have movies that didn't have a production company behind it, that tried to raise money to make movies. And
I always think it's that rough, you know? It's
right,
like,
there's
you're
a shit
taking
ton
over
of
something that's
people-
for us.
Exactly, that just don't have, like, people who are just like not interested in funding that.
Yeah.
And that's because of just at this time, the people that you reached out to, maybe if you reached out to them a year ago, or whatever that may be, they might have done it then, but right now they're into some other shit, so.
Yeah.
Like, to a degree, I could say, like, we can talk about the whole, like, and we can talk about race on, like, so many levels, but when it comes to, like, funding a film, if people fuck with you at that moment, they just do it then, regardless, you know? Like, I had a Ferguson film out in 2015, and it's done great, you know? That Exodus film that we
Did you use Kickstarter for that?
For Ferguson?
Yeah.
Nah, I did it all.
Just like collected footage and
I
showed
just
up.
did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like the Exodus film, so PBS bought the Ferguson thing just recently, right? This Exodus thing that I showed here, we're making a full-length doc that's not really gonna be the same as that. But I didn't do Kickstarter at all. Like, I showed the film, people heard about it, and then I got approached by T. Ashton Gates and Chance the Rapper, and they want to fund the film. So like it just
Organic.
they're like, oh, hey, you're doing really well, so now you want to fuck with me. You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
just
we
use that to
kinda-
your advantage, you know.
We kind of gave up on Kickstarter too because we felt like after the first 2 projects, people were just burned out. We're hitting
Yeah, it's
the
hard.
same
So you
people
end up
over
shaking
and
the same
over and
tree,
over.
and obviously, like, there are a lot of causes right now that people need to be shooting money at, man. And so I'm just like, you know what? Like, maybe my stupid film doesn't need your money. Maybe your money needs.
Well,
to
we're
go
looking
somewhere.
for like we're gonna be doing stuff
Yeah.
forever, and it seems like it's never gonna end. We're gonna be
Yeah.
raising money for projects from now until we die, so it's not like fund this one thing and then everything's gonna change for me. It was more like fund this one thing and then in another year I'm gonna hit you up again and then again. And it was just like they know it's never
It's
gonna
not a
end.
business model.
Yeah.
That's something I kind of learned the hard way about Kickstarter is that one, it's like an all or nothing thing, which is something I'm never gonna do again, and two, it's like, okay, one guy who made like a bunch of marionettes. Let's see, what was going on around that time? Let's see, we're talking healthcare, we're talking racial tensions. I mean, that's the thing, is like, some guy's marionettes compared to, or, like a girl that has cancer or something like that. It's like, I think, yeah, that gave me a better understanding in terms of like where kind of people's priorities are, which are completely understandable. Completely understandable, because like as we were talking earlier, the social issues are.
Talk about that because we try to talk about art as if there's stuff that's like frivolous and stuff that's like really relevant, but I always thought that everyone in the revolution has their own place, like some people march, not everyone marches, someone writes and someone has to document it and someone has to take the footage and spread it beyond the people that were just there. So it's really interesting that you talk about like, oh, it's marionettes versus like,
That's the thing, is like, with marionettes, that's like one of the oldest, if not the oldest forms of animation. I mean, it is before we had like puppets, before we had illustrations. I mean, that's what was performed. I mean, and even like certain cultures, I mean, that would be used to deliver bad news rather gingerly to whoever the overlord was. That way the messenger wouldn't get decapitated or something. But the thing is, like, marionette puppetry has been around for like centuries, if not millenniums, and so, but it's amazing. Like, I kind of learned rather quickly. It's like, do people even really care about this stuff anymore? So there's this whole like, do we preserve certain forms of art or don't we?
I feel like with that comment, like I don't think it even really has to do with like what people care about per se. It's all trends, bro. Like think about everyone talking about like what's going on with black people right now.
Yeah.
Like that shit's been going on. You know what I'm saying? Like so all of a sudden like we're all talking about how fucked up it is. Like it's
now it's fucking fashion.
Yeah,
It's fashionable to be in the know about it. Otherwise, it's happening for generations.
so it just if you hit that trend at the right moment,
Yeah.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. It's just not publicized because it's just like
And
it's
I
not
think
a
it's
cool
important
thing.
that it is a trend. I think it's important that we care about something. And marionettes, maybe this isn't the time to have frivolous. We go in decades and like we have these roaring moments where everything's blissful and we can give a shit about the stuff that's frivolous for a moment. But like sometimes we do, our expression, our creativity is an act of revolution in itself because it's all we can do with ourselves. It's that important, And so yeah, you like spend your money in a different way. And people are conservative with their money in these times too. It's like, I mean, art's super important.
Does something like
Going back to some of the specifics, does something like Patreon make sense for filmmakers? I mean, that's like a lot less money, but it's regular and sustainable. I don't know if anybody's really done that as a filmmaker. What is that? Well, Patreon is like something where basically someone subscribes to you for up to $5 a month or something, and usually like YouTubers do it, like people who try to do it or whatever.
People who have like consistently flowing content out, yeah.
Somebody could make it work. I'm not really sure how. I would really look into it.
Building an audience or building a community around whatever it
Get to
is
see the
you're doing.
Russians if you really want to.
For me right now, so I'm currently, yes, I'm working my way to my first feature, but other than that, like obviously I have certain things I want to accomplish before then. And so I just started my own production company called Women of the Now. And we're a video and event production company here in Chicago. And sort of the way, and we'll see how it goes, but we provide experiential events for the community. So, focusing on specific types of events, like tomorrow night we have an event literally called Poerotica. That's a celebration for women of color, curated, spearheaded entirely by women of color, with a lingerie-inspired dress code, specialty drinks. There's going to be poetry. There's going to be performance. There's going to be DJs. So like for me, I'm kind of trying to approach the trying to raise money for films via event production. Because I'm a producer, I'm a director, I'm a production coordinator, I'm good at bringing people together. So I do think a huge part of it is community. It's about like bringing people together in a space and providing a service or a moment together. And we're leading up to my next short film. We've raised about $3,000 and I want 10. So that's another way I think to think about reaching people face to face is event production.
So Patreon works really good for episodic works and TV series and such like that. Like Cyanide and Happiness. It's like this little Facebook cartoon series, sort of like satirical. But I mean, they've had this sort of successful business model where they'll have people pay for early access to, their film, to their, cartoons and stuff like that. And also, I just wanted to really quick say something about Lonnie's point, which with the Theaster Gates and Chance the Rapper. I also think that it's important as an artist to source your, I'm going to use the word clout again, your clout to your community, to the community that you're from. Like, for example, Chance the Rapper is from Chatham. He helps out, Chatham for the most part. Well, I mean, definitely. Like, he's definitely helped out Chicago. And also, I'd like to sort of, I'd like to edit my point about, not about people, about knowing people who, live in Chatham or live in your community, about them not having as much clout. Because, I mean, so, and this also sort of folds in your point about making the film about marionettes and having it be sort of, you think that it might be a little bit frivolous, right? Or
well, I mean, the story has basically reached its conclusion in terms of the campaign not making its goal. One part of me thinks maybe it, getting some guys marionettes back is frivolous compared to other issues. But
well, I mean, I feel like, I mean, in my job as a writer, because I mean, I'm not a filmmaker, but in my job as a writer, my job is to make people care about my work. Yeah. And I mean, and if your campaign managed to even get some people to give money, you've made people care about your work.
Yes.
And I mean, ultimately, the number of people that care about an issue, for example, race is considered frivolous by at least 50% of Americans, or less, hopefully less. But I mean, there are so many big issues that are considered frivolous. And I mean, I thought the marionette piece was amazing. I mean, especially the part where it was the actual marionette animation. Because I mean, I thought to me it looked so real. It was like a claymation or something, and it just sort of brought me back to that magic of seeing marionettes being played around. But yeah. Thank you. But I think that it's really, really important for artists to give back to the people that, number one, raised them, number one, gave them a community to create their art in. Yeah. So that, yeah, I don't have anything else to say.
That's really interesting because I was really interested in what you were saying, Marie, about creating this sort of community because, I get really frustrated working in Chicago. Now we've been here, I think we've been making films for about 10 years independently, and we make connections with people. They have a little bit of a taste of success, and they flee for those meccas of art like New York or LA, without realizing what we have here and the issues that we have here. I feel are hyper-focused in Chicago, the kind of stuff that was happening in New York in the 80s or Paris in the 60s, stuff like that is happening in Chicago right now, and we should be dealing with that right now. And if we have a unique voice, we shouldn't alter it so that it's appealing and gets us hired off elsewhere, but to really create something here where people want to like flock to us and start doing the kind of work we're doing, and to try to like get that like Chicago look, not the Hollywood look, you know? And like I understand like getting you know, celebrities involved or people that have a little more pull or a little more like of their own sort of following involved. But also it's interesting to see like films where I don't know anyone and they don't look like movie stars, and I learn things about them, and every single character in the film is like a discovery, you know? Whereas if I see like a superhero film, I'm like, oh, that's the blonde, so I know what she's gonna be all about, and that's the guy with blue eyes, and so I know what he's gonna be about. And you know, they might surprise you, but they could play against that type, but it is like an archetype. Whereas when I see independent films, I'm like, I need to learn everything about these really interesting people that don't look like movie stars, they don't talk like movie stars, but they talk like real people, and that's like even more interesting because there's depth there. So I don't know how you guys feel about like casting and like your roots here and how that kind of contributes to your work.
I specifically stayed here for that very reason. I mean, yeah, like I have friends in LA, I have family and friends in New York, and it's really easy to say that you can move to either of those places, but I very specifically stayed here because I think that the arts here are incredible.
Do you feel like the pressure?
Pressure? I mean, no. I also think that the community here is revolutionary. I have little to no interest in working in like the Hollywood industry. I find that most of them to be deplorable and like racist and pedophiles, and I don't know why anyone would expect you to want to work with them. So I wanted to talk about crowdfunding also, because maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I kind of reject the concept for, not entirely. I think that it's like great if you want to do it, but I think that I reject the concept that that is the way that artists are supposed to make money.
Yes.
I think that it was created as like a reaction, like, you know, probably to the recession and like the destruction of the music industry specifically, but I don't think that it's an answer to anything. I think that it's completely unrealistic to think that like everyone can fund their passion projects or whatever by asking your neighbor for $5, you know? It's not sustainable, exactly. And I think
like brought out of what this system is. I mean, like Groupon is my healthcare. Like I got my eyes examined like through a Groupon, and I get my teeth checked out through Groupon because I don't have healthcare. And so like GoFundMe's have you seen it? And so I get my films funded through Kickstarter because that's a problem.
It's like life support rather than
yeah, and I
patronage.
think that something like Lane was talking about like funding them or like finding other ways to fund them. My ultimate point is that I think that it really comes down to the education that you give artists. I think that there's this, you know, like we don't want to admit that we're capitalists, but like that's the society that we live in, and I think that it's a huge disservice that business and economics are not taught, like, or not required to teach to artists. And I think that it's horrible. Like, we should not have to go out and like be like launched into the world if you even have the privilege of going to college in the first place, to decide like to all of a sudden become the CEO of your company when you have no experience doing so. I mean, it is launching a business, and I think that's something that like we have to recognize. And I think that, I don't know, it's important that we help each other and like teach each other those tactics and not rely on just like asking your friends for money, you know?
Yeah. That's really interesting. Do you guys ever feel like there's a disconnect between like how much time you actually spend in your art and how much time you spend just trying to like wrap your head around the business part, raising money, writing grants, all the like...
And how much that hinders your art.
Like car driving, Uber, or something.
Yeah.
That's much of a question. My statement is just regarding regards to crowdsourcing, it's one of those things that's a great idea at first when it starts out, but it's just a matter of time before people come around and bastardize it. I mean, look at Kickstarter. What happened there?
I feel like that's why, like, you can't necessarily like wait for funding, right? So if you have a decent camera, I mean, we all own cell phones, you know, we all own cell phones. We're all capable of editing something, you know, like you have iMovie, shit, you know? So to me, it's like, I think a lot of it is like proof of concept. So if you just go out there and you shoot something and it's like decent, like maybe some of your friends like it, maybe you have a little tiny screening where you have like a donation bin. I mean, get creative. There are ways. And so I feel like while there are these resources online that, I mean, I've used Indiegogo before. I think that it's guilty. I did it. I'm guilty. I've done it before. Not to like point the finger, but like I'm part of it. I've taken Indiegogo, but after I used Indiegogo, I was like, man, I never want to do that again. You know, and I got to keep the money. You know, like I reached my goal. So ever since that experience, I've tried to think of other ways to get the community involved, to approach things with proof of concept, to make teaser trailers.
Make fundraising part of the art.
Yeah. And I actually enjoy that process. I mean, yeah, it like sucks, but I also I think I instinctually think like a businesswoman, and so it's not. You just have to get creative about it.
I wonder. Oh wow, that's camera's on me now. It's like this is a really amazing event. Having a great time now. My body's on fire. Wow. I mean, every single thought that I had just left my brain. A fire was in my belly. Something about like artists working together and building community and like business infrastructures within like smaller communities to like help create a sort of sustainable line of work for everybody. That's literally all I can say. My whole brain just went to mush. I just did a camera in my face. Somebody else talk.
So speaking about like, sorry, did you want to go? Okay. This is like, I don't know, beating a dead horse or whatever, but like, so I've been more or less supporting myself with my art for years, and now I'm getting a full-time job, and that'll change everything because I have a pre-existing condition, which will be uninsurable unless I have health care through a job. So that is like real. I will have to change a whole lot of stuff about how I do things because the next episode of her. Exactly. Hopefully not. But like, so yeah, just like surreal, and it's fine, I guess, because I have good time management strategies, and like a lot of the work I do is just like I want to focus just on the stuff that's really about community things, or just I don't know. It's not like I'm not gonna go out there and try to make a living off of it, because even if I could, I can't, because I can't get health insurance independently if the ACA goes away. So thanks for supporting the arts. So,
yeah, I guess what I hear over and over is like there's this like disconnect between what we do as artists and what we reward in our system that's based on capitalism, because capitalism wants like a return, a profit, something now, and like Tyler's been saying with this film, there's clearly a lot of people who see that work and get touched by it, and it brings them back to their childhood, not to mention all the kids that are directly influenced by it, but that's not like a big fat money maker, so we don't really value it. It's not the time, it's not the trend, it's not hot right now, but there's value to it, and we don't want to lose that forever.
Right.
So there has to be a way to, like we're talking about revolution, like capitalism is holding not just the arts back, but a lot of progress that we can make as a community. And so I'm just really interested in, this. We hear a lot, like I always use the example of like littering. We're always told that, don't litter, don't be a litter bug, because if you throw a can away, then the environment. But like 75% of the ozone layer has been destroyed by like 10 companies in the entire world.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with individuals. I could litter all day long and it wouldn't make a dent.
It's just like PR.
Yeah, it's just to like
shifting
blame
the responsibility to personal.
Yeah, we're like shifting the blame on ourselves. Same thing with filmmaking. If I'm not making enough money, it's my fault because I'm not attaching myself to the right trends at the right time. And
So no,
I
that
don't
should be
think
our
my
logo.
computer-
Yeah, we should do that. That's a good logo.
Yeah. Okay.
Capital.
I did that on purpose.
I'm into it. Thanks. We'll give you credit.
That's when the tech thing.
But like,
That looks
I
like
always think of
1954.
like when art was flourishing during the Renaissance. You know, there was the entire society had to agree that those are the things that we cared about. So, what would it look like if we? I'm not even talking about like a societal revolution. You know, like the Marxist view of seizing the means of production and all that stuff. But that's how I talk. Like that's how Lane Marie's talking. We all now have cameras, so you can't stop us from making films. So then I see a lot of other artificial barriers going up. But how do we break through that, or how do we sidestep it? For instance, like I was talking to Casey earlier about like film festivals. Like we host our own screenings, and the people's reaction to our films are like overwhelming. And the reaction in the market is tepid. Like no one gives a shit because it doesn't look like a film that they could program on HBO. You know, it's like too thoughtful, too personal, too controversial. Got too much going on, not enough. You know.
Or one of my personal favorites is like, oh, it's too rough around the edges. It's like it doesn't look polished. It doesn't look clean or something like
Explain
that.
the films from the 1970s that were the big breakout films,
Oh,
the early
absolutely.
independent films. I mean, that's what the 70s, that's what defined the late 60s and early to mid 70s.
Yeah, that was revolutionary at the time. Yeah.
No one
Well,
had
you
seen
know-
anything like that.
Right now, it's the cinematic universes.
It's all that.
Put it on the internet.
Well, you know, the biggest thing that I've seen is like, I mean, there's like humbleness and then there's like confidence in your work, I guess. And it's not that like your work isn't good or anything, but I mean like, so I went to this poetry reading by Taimba Jess. And you know, he just came out with this Pulitzer Prize winning poetry book. And he was so down to earth, but you know, he wasn't nervous or anything. And I mean, I think what I see with a lot of like independent films in these things is that like I mean, I'm not saying that people have to be suicidally confident in that you destroy somebody's view of your work by being, you know, too overblown about it. But I mean, if you're a filmmaker, like, of course there's like still stuff for you to learn, because I mean, you know, you still have like so much of your life ahead of you, right?
Right.
But like, your film, how do I put this? It's like having confidence in your film is so important, especially when you're like presenting it to somebody else. Like if you say something like, "Oh, I don't think it'll be," then you tint their view of the film like worse by comparison. Like, I don't know, this sounded better in my head. But we're going
No, it makes sense, yeah.
right. I mean, but it just sounded more like flowery. I don't know. I had like a British accent, you know. Yeah. No, but I mean, the thing is, like when I heard that poetry from Taimba, number one, it inspired me because like my poetry when I like went there was like, and then when I was like, oh, I want to be like him, it was like, So, number one, not only by being confident with your own work do you like inspire people to invest their attention and their money within you, you also inspire people like invest their attention into art for themselves and sort of learn from your technique. And also, I mean, like, I knew nothing about a marionette place in Chicago before I saw that film.
Yeah.
Like, just using that film as an example, because like if that were like the first, like make like 5 awesome films after that film, they're not going to be like wildly different. Like, they're going to be wildly different, but it's still going to be your film. People are going to look at that marionette film, they're going to be like, oh, I saw the first, you know, makings of his style and stuff, and it'll be important. You know, if you get like to be some like big. I'm trying to think of a filmmaker that fits into that category, but whatever. We'll just use a random one, like Quentin Tarantino-esque, even though that film is nothing like Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino-esque.
Yeah.
And they're gonna look at your very first film and be like, "Oh, this was crazy," and then you're gonna get that confidence, I guess. But it's like, if you have that confidence from the starting point, then people are gonna be primed.
I feel like we all. I mean, I don't think any of us up here would be doing any of the things that we're doing if we didn't have confidence. I think that, and also I think that if you took any of our work as artists, it kind of, and let's say we had a larger platform. Let's say we showed this to 2 billion people. We're gonna inspire a bunch of people in that aspect. Someone's being inspired by someone else, like every second. I just think that for me, the way that I go about like my art and what I do and how I work is I look at it as I'm a hard worker, period. So if I continuously work as hard as I am and I put out the things that I want to put out as an artist, and that desire to do that is what I'm doing. Like, that's not gonna change, regardless of what level I'm at. So like, if I don't show another film to anyone else, I'm still gonna make it. I'm still gonna make art because I want to do that. And my confidence in what I'm creating isn't gonna fluctuate. Maybe I'll have more or less fans. Who knows? But yeah, who knows? But like, if I'm looking at it from a perspective of I'm doing this because I want to be famous or be rich, I don't think that's the right way to look at it. And I think that the main reason why we do look at these things and we want to get funding for our stuff is because we want to reach out to more people. To
build your reach.
Yeah, not because we're trying to become a Quentin Tarantino or anything.
Or any film, you love it enough, you want to share it with the world.
Like money, rich and famous. No, I mean, I'm just saying I'm just saying like confidence in your work. Number one, I think that it's just a morale booster. I mean, if you get to look at this film and you say like, I'm confident in what I made, like it sounds like you have that, like you're good. But like for me, when I was like starting out with like my art, I didn't have that. I thought that it was just like bad. It didn't give, it wasn't how I wanted myself to be because I didn't have confidence in my art.
John, I just heard this quote about Stanley Kubrick about his early work that no one's heard of, and people were saying that the things that were wrong with it, where it was like really like cold, and the actors seemed like dispassionate, and it was slow, and it was like very like stoic, like all those things were there. But then when he really fully embraced all those things that everyone was saying was wrong and made those early films like just terrible, that became like his trademark, and nobody else can take that away from him. Once he acknowledged that and said, okay, I'm not gonna like try to change those things about myself, I'm gonna make that like my calling card.
I mean, I can only speak for myself when I say this. I don't know if anyone agrees with me or not, but like at no point am I ever gonna be okay with any of the shit that I do. So like I'm gonna make a film and I'm gonna be like, all right, I'm done with this film. I'm putting this film out. I'm gonna go watch that film at a festival or at an event or whatever it is and say, fuck man, I want to change this. So it doesn't matter where it is.
You're just like sinking into your seat.
Yeah, I'm like that all
7 years ago when I was watching it, I was like, what the fuck did I do?
Oh yeah, you dream.
Yeah. No, but I think that's what keeps you going is that like it's kind of like every film you make is the worst film you're going to make, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how the movie ends. Is you're kind of like I can't look at this anymore.
And as confident, I feel like as confident as we are as artists, at the same time we're like, fucking freaking out all the time.
Maybe it's just a front, though.
At least
right?
I know I'm always freaking out.
Well, it's always a fluctuation because it's like you're always freaking out, but then you're also doing it, which
Yeah,
means you
yeah.
have the confidence to do it, right? You're not
Exactly.
just sitting at home. Yeah.
Just dancing around naked and telling everyone what to do.
We're kind of complicated.
Yeah.
Guys, this has been an awesome discussion. We gotta get Kelroy in the house, so thank you so much.